Switching it up today, but only a little bit. Week 13 NFL predictions on tap today. Of course, we're joined by Amir. At this point, you guys knew that was going to happen. But Amir, we have something very special planned for you on today's show. Don't spoil it. But how you doing on this Thursday morning?
I'm ready to go, man. I love being on the podcast and seeing it growing as fast as it is, man, is making me happy. You know, it's a lot more people going to be tuning into this episode because I've been promoting it a lot more. And so I'm excited, man. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, if you're coming in from Amir's side of things, please support the channel. Drop a like, subscribe, and if not, if you're just tuning in for the first time, of course, help us get to 6,000 subscribers currently at 5.2. Of course, on the road to bigger and better things. But let's not waste any time. Last week, on last Thursday's episode, I released this top 10 going into week 12. Of course, on the left side, my 1 through 5, right side, 6 through 10. And Amir, each and every week, I've had you sit here and react to my list, and I've said, "What do you think about this? What would you change?" and all that. This week, you know what? I said, let's switch it up. So if you guys like this idea, drop a comment or just support the pod. Let me know, and we might just do this each and every week. Regardless, we might just do it each and every week. But for me and my list, I can't talk about you, and we'll add this for your list going forward if you have your top tens. A team that fell out of my list is the Houston Texans. They lost the game last week to the Jacksonville Jaguars. However, if they're not 10, they're number 11 as of right now. And another team I want to show love to is the Green Bay Packers, simply for the fact that Jordan Love has been on a different level the last 2 weeks. But going into your top 10, and I'm going to let you go team by team here for your 10 through 6, but go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right, so right here I got the Browns at 10. This might shock a lot of people. A lot of people are kind of dissing the Browns or disrespecting the Browns and feel like they should be knocked out of the top 10, which I understand. But, every team after them, I feel like that their defense takes them over the top. The teams that's right behind them is Pittsburgh. We split with them. And, we could see how bad offensively Pittsburgh can be, even worse than the Browns somehow. And I still feel like they're better than Seattle. I feel like on a given day, they can beat Seattle, 6 times out of 10.
Agreed. At number 9, though, who do you have here?
And so next we got Denver at number 9. This also, might shock a lot of people because, Denver is a team that started off slow. I mean, they looked absolutely atrocious last season and to start this season off. But, in reality, I mean, winning 5 games straight in any scenario, you deserve to get the credit. And, the biggest difference maker that's been with this team is their defense. Their defense has completely hit a 180. The one thing that's holding this team from going over the top, though, is their offense lacks explosiveness. But, I think as the weeks go, as Russ keeps on finding his groove and getting Sutton involved, I think they can fix that.
I mean,
And
a
so,
guy like Marvin Mims would be perfect. He's one of those explosive guys they haven't really utilized, and they're on a 5-game win streak, and they're not even using Jerry Jeudy, who's one of the
exactly.
most talented wide receivers in the league. But obviously, that's not meshing there. But at number 8, go ahead and dive into who you have.
Number 8, we got Jacksonville here. Jacksonville was a team that, me and you both kind of questioned, this team didn't, get a huge win. And they honestly looked like slow to start the season up. I mean, they were slowly dragging out wins, barely beating teams like New Orleans. But last week, man, seeing Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley and ATN, seeing all these guys groove and click, man, this offense is getting scarier and scarier week by week. And the
Yeah, I mean,
defense is also.
Calvin Ridley is one of my favorite receivers in the league, and I thought he was going to be an all-pro level wide receiver. Of course, that is out of the window. But I mean, if he continues on this pace the last 2 weeks, he's no doubt going to be an all-pro wide receiver. But at number 7, you have a team that me and you have gone back and forth on in the group chats, and nobody seems to agree with me about the Detroit Lions. But you have Detroit at number 7, and why do you have them so low?
Yeah, so Detroit, I thought this team was kind of overrated to start the season off. It's not to diss them, but I feel like people were giving them too many expectations. People were expecting them to come in and be an automatic contender right away. And 2 weeks ago, I labeled them as contenders based off of what I seen, despite them beating up on bad teams. I was still kind of being generous, but like they were fringe to being pretenders. And 2 weeks ago when they lost when they almost lost to Chicago, and seeing how bad their secondary has continuously played week by week, and seeing Jared Goff kind of hold this team back, that's not decided. All right, they're pretenders, but I'm still going to keep them up in the top 5. And then them losing to Green Bay last week in embarrassing fashion, on Thanksgiving. I mean, Green Bay dominated that game. I don't care how close the score was. Green Bay started off hot and ended the game hot. I mean, their pass rush was getting to Jared Goff, and the O line was struggling big time. Detroit's D line was not getting to Jordan Love. Only one was Hutch, and they were double teaming him, chip blocking him, and they could not defend Jordan Love or any of the receivers.
And we'll
And
talk
so,
about it. We'll talk about it later. You know, I'm a big Jordan Love fan, and I'm one of the guys that was a
yeah,
fan of him when he was at Utah State coming into the NFL. I wanted the Browns to draft him when we had Baker Mayfield. But I think it was more so of a Jordan Love won that game, more so than Detroit lost it. But I can see the argument either way. Same, I guess is a good way to put it. But at number 6, you have the most explosive offense in the NFL. And why do you have them here at number 6?
yeah. So the Dolphins is another team that I think is a pretender. This team dwindles against the great teams, but exceeds against the bad teams. And the reason why I have them above Detroit is because I feel like they match up well against Detroit. Like I was just saying earlier, Detroit's a team for all year long. In big time moments and big time games, they've struggled to get to the quarterback unless it's Hutch. And that's been their biggest weakness. They need more guys to take the pressure off of him and get to a quarterback. And on top of that, you add to the fact that their secondary has been struggling. I don't see Miami, struggling to score the ball against this team. I see them being able to score at ease. Tua will sit back comfortable and absolutely, destroy this defense. And that's how I put Miami over Detroit.
Well, I agree with you on 4 teams on this on your 6 through 10. But let's start off at the bottom of the list because at these first 3 we don't have any differences. At number 10, I do have the Browns. Their track record is just too impressive at this point in the season, given all the injuries we've had. I mean, going forward, we're gonna have even more injuries to guys like Amari Cooper and DTR, a rookie that showed a little bit of promise. Not, he's not breaking any eyes, or he's not turning any eyes, is a good way to put it. But he's definitely, he was a part of why we were competitive the last 2 weeks. He is now out. So we're going to have even more injuries added to the list. And to me, their track record has just been too impressive. Now, again, at full health, we're above the Broncos, in my opinion. But at number 9, I do have the Broncos, a team that's won 9 straight games, or not 9 straight games. They're at number 9. They've won 5 straight. And I guess I didn't really realize how many players I actually like on this Broncos team. Of course, I like Patrick Surtain, but guys like Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams, I've been fans of for a long time. Of course, if you follow the fantasy episodes, you would know that. But a long time I've been fans of those guys, dating back to college, in all honesty. And then at number 8, just like you, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that has played their best football the last 2 weeks, even though they're not on that 5-game winning streak they were once before early in the year. I think they're playing their best football right now, and if they can play at this level, I think they can actually be a sneaky contender. But at number 7 is our first difference in, the 5, 6, and 7 for me are all interchangeable. I'm not going to argue you too much on it, but the Cowboys stay at 7 for me. They didn't have a convincing win last week against the Commanders, and it's just, to me, they're a team that's going to be an okay regular season team. Come playoff time, we don't know if we can trust them. I will say there's a different vibe around the Cowboys this year. They do seem to be taken more seriously. However, until I'm proven wrong, I really can't have them in the top 5. And then at number 6 for me, another team that, look, they're good, they're explosive, they're fun. They just haven't won that big time game in the Miami Dolphins. And I think technically this past week, they now have a win over an above 500 team this year, but they didn't beat them when they were at that level. So give me the Miami Dolphins at number 6. Again, nothing too crazy here. But at number 5, in our top 5s, is a good way to put it, you have the Dallas Cowboys. Why do you have them here at number 5?
So right here, I got the Cowboys, and similar to what you said, they're a team that's kind of iffy. They can either be the greatest team or absolutely trash. And we've seen them absolutely dominate teams, bad teams, dwindle against great teams. And I think now this Cowboys team, I probably have the most confidence I've had in them in recent years, just because Dak is finally playing good. All last year we're waiting on Dak to kind of pretty much find a groove and get going, and I think now he's kind of getting comfortable playing with confidence, which we haven't seen since his rookie year. And their defense on top of that, kind of adds to the fact that Dak's playing good. It takes the pressure off of him. Power's playing well. CeeDee Lamb is obviously solidifying himself as a top 5 receiver, and that's why I got Dallas at 5.
Yeah, I mean, what's his name? Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator there for a couple of years. This is probably going to be his last year as a Dallas Cowboy defensive coordinator, because he's got the defense playing on a different level right now. And if it wasn't for Jim Schwartz and the Browns defense, we might be considering this one as the best in football, and that's even with the injuries. But at number 4, you have a team that you've been defending
Yeah,
to
which is
eat you
crazy.
the hockey sticks and back. But at number 4, why do you have Lamar and the crew?
Man, this is absolutely crazy. The fact that I defend this team, but man, it's crazy because this team, you know, is the only team in the league that's top 10 in every stat as far as offense, defense, and special teams.
Point
I
differential.
think they're like the second best special teams unit in the league, which is absolutely crazy. And special teams is something that kind of goes unnoticed. And you know, this team is just like honestly efficient in every aspect. Obviously they got the injury with Mark Andrews, which is going to hurt them in the long run. But the defense is the second best in the league in my opinion, behind Cleveland. And on top of that, the run game is elite no matter what game it is. They honestly got a good scheme that allows Lamar to kind of play comfortable and gets other guys involved in the run game as well as not him. And, this team is hard to defend. As a D coordinator, I go into every game scared of trying to defend this team and contain them. And so
Yeah,
I got the Ravens at 4.
I mean, you didn't mention it there, but the highest point differential in the league by far as well. So, like you mentioned, this team is not only winning, but they're winning dominantly, and they are currently the number 1 seed in the AFC. But at number 3, despite not being the number 1 seed technically, you have the Kansas City Chiefs over the Baltimore Ravens. I guess quickly dive into why these top 3 teams are your top 3 teams.
Yeah, so I got the Chiefs at 3, and I think right now, they beat Baltimore. Them losing Mark Andrews, but Baltimore losing Mark Andrews is a big part of that. And I also think Kansas City matches up well against Baltimore. And you know, I think if they were to play right now, I could see Casey, slightly winning this game, containing the run, like what they've been doing to every team this year, because that's a strong part of their defense, stopping the interior run, exterior run, whatever. And the Ravens, they got a crippled OBJ and a young Zay Flowers to throw to. And so I think Kansas City matches up well.
I think Kansas City, no doubt. I'll briefly talk about them later. You touched on a lot of great points, but I'm just surprised you'd had them not in the top 2. As number 2, you have the San Francisco 49ers, a team that, of course, was on top of the world first month or so into the year. They started 5-0. They looked untouchable, is a good way to put it. And then they went on a little bit of a losing stretch, a cold stretch. Then they made some moves at the deadline, and they've bounced back maybe better than they looked at the early part of the season. They're at number 2 over the Kansas City Chiefs. Why do you have them there as you've been high on this Chiefs team all year?
Yeah, now this is something that's going to surprise some people, but man, this Niners team, and I was kind of wrestling with this back and forth for the past few days. Like, have they finally surpassed KC? And I think they do. I mean, this is the second lowest roster in the league. Honestly, you could argue number one.
You can. Talent wise, they might be.
Exactly. And outside that 3-game losing streak, I mean, this team has looked completely invincible. I mean, the past 3 weeks they have been just dominating teams. I mean, they beat Seattle by 20. Dominated
Jacksonville by
Tampa
like
Bay.
31.
Exactly. And Brock Purdy, ever since that 3-game streak, I mean, he's thrown 8 touchdowns and only 1 interception. Throwing like around 78%, which is absolutely crazy. And so man, this team is elite. I think this week, I'll get into my pick for this week between these top 2 teams later on, but I got the Niners at second.
At number 1, you talked about it there. It is the Philadelphia Eagles, and to me, there's not much to say here. They're 10-1. They're beating good teams. They're beating bad teams. And me and you have said it. Last week, maybe in that second half, they started to get to that level, but I still don't think they're playing their best football, and I'll talk about that later as well. But right now, I mean, they just, even when their backs are against the wall and they have a slim chance to win, they find that way to win, and it's hard to go against the Eagles right now. But
Yeah.
is there any other reason why you have them at number 1?
I mean, they're 10-1. I mean, they've won the biggest games in the league, so I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Big matchup this weekend. They have big matchup this weekend against the Niners, and then I think they play Dallas the following week. So 2 big weeks here for some of those NFC contenders. But in my top 5, 2 teams that I agree with as far as the exact spots they're in are the Philadelphia Eagles at number 1. We just talked about it, and the Baltimore Ravens. I finally gave in, and I had the Baltimore Ravens at my number 4 spot.
I know.
Like you mentioned there, even without Mark Andrews, this team is still, they're one of the most dominant teams in the NFL. Like I mentioned, their point differential is like 30 above the next team. So not only are they winning, but they're dominating in these wins. And sure, they've played some teams that have had some injuries, but you can't really control what's in front of you. You have to control what you can control. and that is getting the wins for John Harbaugh there in the Baltimore Ravens. At number 5, I did move them down a spot for taking that loss to Jordan Love. As I mentioned, I think Jordan Love, this is his coming out party, and you know more than anybody else. I've been on that Jordan Love bandwagon for a while, and sorry, it is all full. You guys cannot hop on at this point. And then at 2 and 3, same like you mentioned, you talked about both these great teams. I just have them flip flopped. I think just due to that 3-game losing streak, I have Kansas City above them in a 1-game setting. With two teams that are so close, and KC has again maybe the best defense in the Mahomes era. I'm going to take the better quarterback, and I'm going to take the best player in football in Patrick Mahomes, because in a playoff setting, it doesn't matter if he's hurt. They just find a way to win, and maybe they have the best coach, tight end, and quarterback duo in the entire NFL. I don't even know if that's a debate at this point. But again, those are our top 10. AMIR. Next week, if you would like to continue to do that, of course, we can bring that back each and every week. But I just thought about it, as we only have like 8 weeks left. After this week, we have 14 through 18, so I guess 5 weeks, and then the playoff run. So we actually, and our time for doing these predictions on a weekly basis are winding down. But the race for Caleb, this is a series that we've added in about a month ago at this point, as each and every week we're looking who is going to get this next Patrick Mahomes generational quarterback. As last year there was a little bit of hype around Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, but it was nothing like Caleb Williams. Of course, he's the reigning Heisman. He's not going to get it this year, but he's no doubt going number 1 in the NFL draft. The Bears, via the Panthers, that trade that took place last year with Bryce Young, they have the number 1 pick. The Cardinals lost, and they are at number 2. The Patriots and Bears, with their actual pick, are the top 4. So the Bears have 2 top 4 picks. Very, very interesting there. But then we have a new team that enters the fold. The Giants with Tommy DeVito. They are finding ways to win, and they took care of the dismantled Patriots last week. So Washington enters the top 5. I want to ask you this. We've already talked about these top 4 teams, but for Washington, let's say we have Drake May, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and an offensive tackle go in the top 4. At number 5, would you entertain the idea, if you're Washington's coach or GM, would you take Michael Penix or another quarterback at 5, or would you roll with Sam Howell going forward?
Honestly, at this point, I think you have to just stick with Sam Howell. Just for the simple
Agreed.
fact that I think, outside of Caleb Williams, I feel like no quarterback comes close. And on top of that, Sam Howell's been playing well. What's holding him back is the O-line. The dude is getting beat up. He's getting hit every week. He's by far the most sacked quarterback in the league, I think by like 15 sacks, something ridiculous. And they're failing him right now. They probably feel like they're failing him right now. And they somehow still have 4 wins. I don't know how. They're still finding ways to get it done. And Sam Howell's been playing good enough for them to say, okay, this might be the guy. We can go into next year kind of building around him and being comfortable.
I mean, it is a coincidence that ever since they traded 2 of their star defensive ends, they've lost 3 straight games. So they're definitely, we can see what direction they want to go, but can they tank hard enough to get the best offensive tackle in the class to help out this young quarterback? But I agree with you. They need to stick with Sam Howell and give him a shot, at least one more year at the starting quarterback position. But then let's go on to our weekly predictions. Last week, that is a typo there. Of course, it's week 12. I went 12-4. Of course, there was no teams on bye. And AMIR, you went 11-5. So very close there. We differed on, I think, 4 of the matchups. And again, it was only one difference between the 2. But then our season record, I'm 126-54, just about 70%. I think it's exactly 70%. But you're not too far behind. 119-61. I guess any thoughts about your record at this point? I know last week a couple games could have went your way, but they went, I guess a little bit more in my favor.
Yeah, my pick that kind of, surprised everybody last week was that Bills over Eagles game. And I was heated because, I thought it was a good pick, a good prediction. Josh Allen finally had the breakout game that I predicted. He played well enough for them to, get to that point. And then, the Bills secondary, absolutely sold in the game, absolutely failed him in the offense. And then, the Eagles hit a 59-yard field goal in the worst absolute conditions, and everything was just like meant for the Eagles to win at that point.
Yes. And that's what scares me come playoff time, is the Eagles are seemingly getting everything to go their way right now. So I'm a little bit worried about them come playoff time. But Some teams that are on bye. Last week we had 0. This week we have 6. In the AFC side of things, we have the Ravens, Bills, and the Las Vegas Raiders. The Ravens are, of course, a top 4 team in the NFL in our opinions. In the NFC side of things, we have 2 NFC North teams in the Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, they've allowed 1 touchdown the last 2 weeks, but they haven't won either of those games. So that's just something interesting to throw out there. And then the Giants, they've won 2 straight with Tommy DeVito. I guess he might be their guy, at least for the short term. But those are the teams that are on bye. And let's start off with the Thursday night matchup. It is the Seattle Seahawks at 6-5 going to Dallas to take on the 8-3, 3 straight win Dallas Cowboys team. The only note that I have here for this game is that the Dallas Cowboys at home, they're 5-0, and they've won those games by an average of 29 points. So
That's
Dallas is
crazy.
dominated at home, and I'm going to keep this one short and simple. Geno Smith's Linsanity run is over. Give me Dallas at home to keep rolling and be this dominant regular season team that they are.
Yeah, Geno Smith is absolutely done. I feel bad for what's going to happen for to him this week. Seattle fans are going to try to drive him out the city, with pitchforks and flames, and and I see Dallas.
Maybe.
It's no problem.
Absolutely. But moving over to our Sunday games, as we'll talk about these games a little bit more. But for the Colts, Jonathan Taylor just broke his thumb. He's going to be out for at least 2 to 3 weeks. I guess there's a chance that he's done for the year after this thumb injury. But currently, the Colts are second in their division, and they're 1 outside of the playoff race. Or I think they actually are the 7th seed in the AFC. So this team might actually be in the playoffs with Gardner Minshew right now. So shout out to the Colts, but who do you have in this matchup in the AFC South rivalry?
So in this matchup, I got the Colts. I think offensively the Colts have been great this year, surprisingly. And right now, they have life. They have a breath of life. Like, hey, man, we can make a playoff run. Get to the playoffs, maybe sneak in, as a lower seed. But for the Titans, I mean, the Titans are in straight rebuild mode. They're pretty much just giving Levis the keys, and I think I just think he isn't ready. I think even though they're missing JT, you know, Minshew and this coach team could still do enough to, win this game by a score or two.
Yeah, I think I do want to shout out to Will Levis, as again, I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he did take accountability, and you just don't see that all the time in these young quarterbacks where they tend to blame it on the coach or the situation or the weather, whatever the case may be. But Will Levis, I don't know if you guys seen it, but after the game last week, he came to the podium and he said, it's on me. I have to play better. And again, you just don't see a lot of accountability taken by some of these young quarterbacks. So not the biggest fan of the player, but for the person, I mean, that's always what you want to see out of your young quarterback, excuse me. But just to clarify, we're both taking Indianapolis here to continue rolling to 4 straight wins.
Yep.
We're both taking Indianapolis. Next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons going to New York to take on the Jets, the Tim Boyle-led Jets. But for the Falcons, they got a win last week, and it was ugly. But Bijan Robinson maybe had his best game on the season, and they traveled to New York to take on a very tough Jets defense in New York. And this game, it was surprisingly one of the hardest games for me to pick. Even though the Jets have lost 4 straight and they have Tim Boyle as their quarterback, this game was very hard for me to pick. But I'm interested to see, who do you have in this matchup, as both teams really need a win?
Dude, I looked at this game for like 2, 3 days thinking like, man, who am I going to pick for this game? And after, really thinking about it, kind of taking into account the immeasurable factors, I'm going with the Jets here. The Jets right now, still have competitive players on their team. Garrett Wilson, all those guys on defense, like Sauce, DJ Reed, all those guys are like probably meeting right now saying, hey, listen, whether we got a chance for playoffs or not, we do not want to lose. And, it's a saying that says change or die. And the fact that they changed from Zach Wilson and giving Boyle a chance, I can see this team kind of being behind Boyle's back saying, hey, man, we with you. We got you. We're going to get this dub. And, the thing about the Falcons, I don't trust Bijan to carry this team like he did last week. That last week, that game was ugly. Bijan played really well. And I think this Jets defense can do enough to slow him down and neutralize his offense completely.
I was pretty mad because I thought you were going to go with the Atlanta Falcons, and I was like, you know what, this is going to be the game where I can go differ from him and I can get that extra win. But I agree with you here. I do think that, for all the points that you talked about, they're home. They have one of the best defenses. And even though they've only averaged, I think, 8 points a game over these last 4 games, the Jets, to me, I think at home with that defense, they can shut down all of the passing game. And the Jets still have the talent to stop the run. I think the defense can really carry this win for the Jets. And who knows? Maybe we'll get a crazy Mike White kind of game out of Tim Boyle this week. But I agree with you. I do have the Jets here at home winning this one. And then moving over to Detroit, going to New Orleans. Detroit, the turnovers have been the problem. And that's really what the last 2 weeks have come down to. Like you talked about 2 weeks ago against the Bears, they barely lost against a team that doesn't want to win football games right now. And last week against the Packers, they've had seven total turnovers over the last 2 weeks. And it's just they can't take care of the ball for a team that has a quarterback that, to me, in my opinion, is just like a Kirk Cousins archetype of a quarterback where they take care of the ball, they're a game manager, and they do just enough to get the wins. Jared Goff has not done that the last couple of weeks. And now they're playing a tough New Orleans defense in New Orleans. I'm curious to see who you have in this matchup, as Derek Carr hasn't looked the greatest either.
Yeah, you know, I think this game is going to be closer to what people think. I think just based off of Detroit whooping on bad teams, and teams are going to pick Detroit. I'm going with Detroit here, but I think it's going to be a close one. I think despite New Orleans having these struggles offensively, I think they'll still do enough to force turnovers and to make it tough on Jared Goff and make it tough on this offense. But I'm taking Detroit on the road here.
I agree with you here. I think Detroit needs one of those statement victories that we've seen out of teams like the Ravens or even the Dolphins against the Broncos. We need a statement victory from them, even if it's not necessarily in the scoreboard. We need a game where we're like the Lions dominated from start to finish, and we haven't had one of those in a long time. So I think we need one of those because their playoff hopes are not in jeopardy right now. But I think as far as seeding in the NFC, they need this victory more than a lot of teams right now, as far as how much they can dominate from start to finish, at least in my opinion. And then Denver and Houston, a very interesting matchup. This is another matchup where I'm not gonna lie, I was sitting here for a while and I was like, who do I want to take in this game? Of course, only a select few of teams have gotten the Super Bowl logo next to their name here, as you see on the right side of your screen. And no, that's not because we think that the Denver Broncos have Super Bowl, a Super Bowl in their future. That's just because they've won 5 straight games, and I expected only the elite of the elite teams to accomplish that this season. However, the Broncos have won 5 straight games and over really, really good teams in that stretch, over teams like Kansas City, Buffalo, Cleveland, missing 2 there, but they've picked up some really quality wins. But then on the flip side, the home team here is CJ Stroud and the Texans. CJ Stroud has been off to an historic start to his career, and this offense is the most fun offense to watch in the NFL aside from the Miami Dolphins. The popular pick here might be the Houston Texans, but I'm going to roll with Sean Payton, one of my favorite coaches of all time. Of course, he was the coach for my GOAT, Drew Brees. So I'm going to roll with the team that's hot right now and the more veteran team that really needs to win more right now, and that is the Denver Broncos. So give me the Denver Broncos to win 6 straight games.
So with Denver, their the defense has been playing great. Their offense has been playing well too, but I'm taking Houston at home here. Especially with Noah Brown possibly coming back. I don't see their defense neutralizing this offense. I mean, this offense has been amazing. Stroud has been great. Honestly, their receiving core has been the most surprising part other than Stroud. I mean, all these dudes are amazing, and it's hard to tell if they're just that great or if Stroud's making them look good. But I don't think Denver's offense is explosive enough and high scoring enough to keep up with Houston. And so by that point, I'm taking Houston at
And I think
home.
that was really the most impressive thing for me, and why I had them at number 9 on my power rankings, was just because Russell Wilson has not been putting up the greatest statistical numbers, and this team is still winning games at
Yeah.
at obviously at a high rate. For the Texans, I wanted to pick them here. I wanted to go with the more veteran team, and I hope that the Texans win here. I think the X factor for this game, in my opinion, though, is going to be Tank Dell, because Nico Collins is going to be in Alcatraz with Patrick Surtain on his back all game.
Right.
But Tank Dell, I think he's the X factor in this game, and if history tells us anything, Tank Dell and CJ Stroud can win you a ball game. But then moving over to the most exciting matchup this weekend, we have the fiery offense that wins a lot of. Oh, never mind. The Chargers, they're 4-7. They've lost 3 straight games. The Patriots, they've lost 4 straight games. They're 2-9. The Patriots season is over. And right now, the questions are more so, who is our coach going forward and who is our quarterback going forward? The recipe to having a good team is figuring out those 2 things. And right now, the Patriots don't know if they can trust either of those. And then the Chargers on the road. simply for the fact that I think they're in a more of a win now mode. I think Brandon Staley is going to be coaching for his career in this game, and I'm going to take the Chargers. And as much as I hate to say it for Chargers fans, I think Brandon Staley can hold on for another week, and for the simple fact that New England's not trying to win a game.
Yeah, so the fact that New England isn't trying to win, just like you just said, I'm taking the Chargers here. I mean, New England has a crazy stretch of games, for this half of the season, and I think right now they're going to tank. I mean, they got the Chargers. Actually, they got a tough Pittsburgh defense. They got the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Bills, and then
I
the
didn't even
Jets.
notice that. That's insane.
Exactly, the final
They
week
might
of
not win a game.
exactly. So, I think they honestly might lose out. And I think right now, they're kind of sitting here like, realistically, we don't have a chance to accomplish anything. And so we're gonna go after the prize, and we know what that is. And so
Caleb
by that
Williams.
point, exactly. And so by that point, I'm taking the Chargers on the road.
And not much to analyze there, unfortunately. But then moving over to the Cardinals in Pittsburgh, and I know a lot of teams have matched up in the Super Bowl, but every time I see these guys match up, I see that Santonio Holmes catch play in my head, and I see that Larry Fitzgerald magical touchdown catch and run. It's just when I see these two teams, I think of one Madden 10, whatever that game, with the two stars on the cover. But I also think of just that Super Bowl and how fun of a Super Bowl that was. But for Kyler Murray, they're 2-10, and they haven't looked the greatest ever since his debut. But they still have Kyler Murray, and that adds a different element to this offense. Marquise Brown and Kyler Murray finally got on the same page last week. But with all that being said, Pittsburgh got a new offensive coordinator last week, and Kenny Pickett looked like an actual serviceable NFL quarterback. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet here. Give me Pittsburgh at home with their defense to squeak out a win here. I think it might be closer than people think, though.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna go ahead and go the opposite of you. I'm gonna go Arizona here.
Wow.
And this is surprising, but we've been saying this for weeks. Kyler's doing everything in his power, in my opinion, not let them get Caleb. And so I think for Kyler, right now it's pretty much, tryout season. For him, he's like, all right, I'm gonna play good. I'm gonna prove that I'm still like that, to pretty much show the league that, when I leave Arizona, you guys should still want to chase after me, want to pay me a bag. And so you know, I think Pittsburgh is obviously going to make it tough on Arizona. This might be like a 10-7 game, low scoring game. And the one thing that kind of scares me is the fact that, Kenny Pickett has a new offensive coordinator, obviously. But I'm going to take the upset here on the road. I'm taking Arizona.
Now, I would love that for Kyler Murray. Of course, he's one of my other favorite quarterbacks in the NFL. The Miami Dolphins, again, we've talked about them as they are 8-3 right now. They're doing what they're supposed to do, but those 3 losses are standing out more so than the 8 wins, simply for the fact that those 3 losses have come against the best 3 teams on their schedule. But then they go to Washington, the team that we talked about earlier, a team that right now they need to protect Sam Howell. And I just don't know if they can do that against the Miami Dolphins with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb and the other talented pieces they have in that front 7. Not to mention, Miami secondary is playing on a different level right now.
Well, Phillips is out.
I'm sorry?
Phillips is out, but
Oh, Phillips is out this game? I didn't even
he
even if he's
last week.
Oh, that is right. You know what? Wait, in my defense here, I've been dealing with a little bit of an injury, so my mind is out of it. Regardless, the Washington Commanders did fire their defensive coordinator and Ron Rivera, and to my understanding, is going to be taking over those responsibilities. So Eric Bieniemy is really going to be the offensive coordinator, and Ron Rivera is going to control the defense. I don't know if that's going to be able to do much, as Emmanuel Forbes and Kendall Fuller, they're going to have their hands full with a guy named Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So give me Miami on the road to get a much-needed win to position themselves for the number 1 seed.
Yeah, I'm taking Miami by like 20 or 30 here. I mean, we're realistically, like you said earlier, I mean, they lost 3 straight, right after they trade both of their star DNs. And Tua's going to have a field day. He's going to sit back there comfortable. And, even if Washington can move the ball, I just don't see them stopping the Miami in any way.
Moving over to the 4 o'clock window, we have an NFC South matchup, and not a very exciting one in all honesty. The 1-10 Carolina Panthers, they just fired Frank Reich, their head coach. And for the first time ever, an NFL coach has been fired 2 years in a row before finishing their tenure with the team. And that is, of course, Frank Reich. I think he was done wrong, and I think that's a different argument for a different day. But I don't think he should have been fired at this point, given what he has on this Carolina Panthers team. Regardless, they go to Tampa Bay to take on the Baker Mayfield-led Tampa Bay Bucks. And for the simple fact that Baker Mayfield is playing for his job the rest of the way, I think their playoff hopes are kind of out of the window. Actually, I don't know. I guess they're only one game back from first. But for the simple fact that they still have a chance at the playoffs and Baker's playing for his career, give me Tampa Bay here at home to keep it relatively simple.
Yeah, I was honestly gonna, go back to another upset pick with the Panthers, but I think the Bucks, just like you just said, Baker is pretty much fighting, for his career at this point. And the Bucks, I mean, their playoff hopes are over. Obviously the Panthers are still trying to fight, the way to get wins. Um, but I think this Bucks offense has enough, to win this game no matter what. And despite their secondary and their defense playing absolutely terrible, and Bryce Young's probably gonna actually look like an NFL quarterback this week, I still think the Bucks still have enough and too much for the Panthers to handle.
Yeah, I mean, the Buccaneers have lost 6 of their last 7. Hasn't been a great stretch for them. But we just touched on it there. One team's trying to win, one team's not. But I guess the last thing we can mention is that the last time Carolina had an interim head coach, they won a couple of games there with PJ Walker, and I think Steve Wilkes was the guy that took over last year. But then the matchup of the week, it's no shocker. I think actually San Fran is favored in this matchup on the road, which is
Yep.
a little bit surprising to me. But with the addition of Chase Young, I guess that surprise goes out of the window. San Fran here, they lost in the NFC title game last year. Brock Purdy, of course, hurt his shoulder very early in that game, and it really just wasn't much of one game after the fact that Brock Purdy went down with an injury. So they want the revenge in this game. And Philly, they haven't looked their best. They're scraping by with wins, but they're 10-1, best team in football. They won 5 straight. A lot of firepower, a lot of explosiveness, and a lot of good coaching in this matchup. Who do you have in the game of, at this point, game of the year?
So I'm going with the Niners here. The biggest weakness for the Eagles is them starting games off slow. And I think that's just been holding this team back. There's no reason why week to week, they should be starting off in a dogfight with the Bills, losing by 2 scores to the Chiefs. I mean, the team is too talented. And it's crazy, Hurts, when leading this season, he's throwing 7 TDs and 9 interceptions. When he's losing, he's throwing 22 touchdowns and 1 interception this year, which is absolutely crazy. And against this Niners team, you can't start off slow. And I think they're going to start off slow, and the Niners are just going to take control of that and utilize it and run with it.
Just like last week, I'm going to continue to roll these Eagles until they prove me wrong. The Eagles, to me, are so I think they're going to win this game at home. They're underdogs for the first time in probably over a year at this point. But to me, it's just I think they're just they have the most talent in the league. Aside from maybe the Niners, the most complete roster. And in a game like this where it is evenly matched, I'm going to take the better quarterback, and especially because he's at home. Give me the Philadelphia Eagles, but I do worry about what you just mentioned. I'm worrying about that starting slow. And I do worry about Brock Purdy having a really good day here. And Brandon Ayuk should also have a pretty good day here, as the Eagles cannot defend wide receivers.
At
But
all.
I will take Philly here at home to, I guess, differ from you. I don't know if we've ever differed this much on a single given week. But then the Cleveland Browns and the LA Rams. The Browns are 7-4. They lost the game last week. Of course, a lot of injuries headed our way. But then we go to Los Angeles to take on the Rams, a team that's, been trying to figure out a lot of things this season. But if I'm not mistaken, the Rams have won 2 straight games. And, Cooper Kupp's only going to be healthier going forward. But I will also say that Cooper Kupp's been an afterthought. Kyron Williams was my fantasy player of the week because he was on IR for 4 to 6 weeks, came back, and they gave him a full workload. He had like 38 touches, over 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Kyron Williams worries me in this game. We know the Browns have a good defense, but we have a lot of questions. When we know Dorian Thompson-Robinson's going to be out, is it going to be Joe Flacco, or is it going to be, I guess, PJ Walker at our quarterback? Is Myles Garrett going to suit up? Is Denzel Ward going to suit up? There's just, to me, a lot of questions, and I hope the Browns win this game because that all but seals our playoff lives. I think if we win this game, I think we at least sneak into the playoffs. But I do have the Rams here at home with Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua to figure it out here and improve to 6-6.
I'm also taking the Rams at home here. I think they match up well against the Browns offensively. And I think they're going to have a similar game plan to what Denver had last week. They're going to target Greg Newsome earlier if Denzel Ward's not playing. And Greg Newsome and Emerson are going to have their day full with Nakua and Cup, bouncing around in the slot, outside the slot, wherever. And I think our defense obviously has been anchoring us to this point, but I think at this point the injuries are just too much. Myles Garrett might get out. We got all the questions, who's going to be at quarterback. It's just too much going on. And I think at this point, it's just too much for us. So I'm taking the Rams at home here.
Yeah, unfortunately, as Browns fans, but this was a year that the AFC, you can argue is more wide open than ever with the all the injuries, but things just it's a domino effect here for the Cleveland Browns. Then Sunday Night Football, we have the Kansas City Chiefs at 8-3, the Packers at 5-6. Jordan Love's making his Sunday Night Football debut, and if you follow me over on TikTok, which if you don't, go follow me over on TikTok. I posted a video. I think it was either late July or early August, and I said the Jordan Love game we're going to remember from this season, whether good or bad, is going to be this Week 13 game against the Kansas City Chiefs at home. In that video, I did predict that Jordan Love would have a crazy game, have his career-defining game to prove to the Packers fans that, hey, I'm your guy going forward. And I do think with how he's played the last 2 weeks, that is a possibility that if he can go in at home on Sunday night in primetime to take down this tough Chiefs defense, and not to mention Patrick Mahomes, I think that's going to be a career-defining moment for Jordan Love. However, I have to put my fandom aside, and I will take the Chiefs here on the road.
Yeah, Jordan Love has looked great these past 2 weeks, but the one thing, he wasn't matching up against was a great pass rush and a great defense. And I think here, he's going to have his hands full. It's going to be tough for him,
A lot of
despite
injuries
him
for
being
Green Bay as well.
exactly, then the injury bug on top of that, and I don't see them, getting to Mahomes like how they got to Goff last week. And so by that reason, I'm taking Kansas City on the road.
Yeah, there's just too much talent with Kansas City. And again, fandom has to be put aside for certain things like this. And then on Monday night, we have the Bengals at 5-6. They've lost 3 straight games. A large part of that is due to the Joe Burrow injury. And then Jacksonville. Jacksonville's 8-3. I saw a stat that this is their first Monday night game since 2011. If you don't remember, 2011, they had a quarterback by the name of David Garrard. I think he's more so known for that Hail Mary, than anything. But it's been a long time since Jacksonville's had a Monday night game, so I'm expecting it's going to be a crazy crowd there in Jacksonville. But I'm going to keep it simple here. Trevor Lawrence has averaged like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. I'm going to take Jacksonville at home, and since they just don't have the quarterback to compete in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, them losing Burrow pretty much cooked their entire season. And Jacksonville is playing, contender like football, as crazy as it sounds. I mean, their defense has been amazing. The offense is absolutely clicking right now, and they're the hottest team in football other than the Broncos and the Eagles. And so, by that reason, I'm taking Jacksonville pretty easily here at home.
Yeah, I mean, Calvin Ridley, if he can look like this the rest of the way, we know Christian Kirk's going to be that steady wide receiver. By the way, I love Christian Kirk as well. He's one of my favorites. I don't know about you, Amir, but I just like those possession wide receivers. I know we've talked about it off the pod, but guys like Christian Kirk, Amon-Ra, Keenan Allen, like some of those guys have just been like my favorite wide receivers. I don't know if it's ego. I don't know if it's, that they just show up and do their job, whatever the case may be. I just seem to like those kind of guys.
Yeah, no, seriously. Like, I love those guys who aren't super flashy or like overly athletic, and they don't depend off a raw talent to play. Instead, it's the technique they hone in to do. They do their jobs. They find ways to make plays. They're gritty and they're grimy. I like those kind of guys too.
Yeah, I mean, high motor guys. High IQ guys you can trust. As I'm just joking. But moving over here to our final thing. If you're new to these weekly predictions, we haven't done this the last couple of weeks, just because we've added some new things to the show on Thursdays. But we're bringing this back here on the left side of your screen, or I guess in the middle, where the Green Bay sign is and down. Those are going to be my predictions. And on the right side, of course, is Amir's for the upset pick of the week. Just to clarify, if you're new, these are just teams that we think can have that upset win. We're not counting these against our record if they're right or if they're wrong. So to me, Green Bay is that upset pick of the week because, well, I kind of have to stand on what I said in the offseason. And I do think Jordan Love can have a really good week. Even if they do come up just a little bit short, I think Green Bay is going to be my upset team of the week. And to pair with that, Jordan Love is going to be my player of the week in a loss. If that makes any sense, I know how can you be the player of the week in a loss? It's the regular season. You can do that. So if it's a 34-31 game and Jordan Love has a good game, I would consider that a really good performance given that all the injuries he has and the tough matchup he has. But for you, the upset of the week and the hot take, they all coincide with the same team.
Yeah, so for my upset, I'm taking the Panthers over the Bucks, and the Bucks have not the Bucks, but the Panthers have everything to play for. Now, obviously, the playoff chances are over, but at this point, I mean, shoot, I mean, they got a lot of coaching stuff they got to figure out. Bryce Young is going to prove people wrong about him not being a bust, and that he's a better quarterback than C.J. Stroud at this point. And this Bucks team, I think the Panthers, if they were to have a great game, in the air, this would be the game. I mean, the Bucks defense has looked horrendous recently. And for my hot take, I'm going with Bryce Young to throw over 300 yards. You know, um,
Statement
I
game from Bryce Young.
yeah, exactly. And I think if it was to happen, it would be this week. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this year Bryce Young hasn't even thrown for over 300. Not even over for 250. And so I think right here's going to be a breakout game for him. He's going to prove, people that he still has ability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, number one pick for a reason, and I guess you just need the right coach at the helm. But for my hot take, I have the Ramondre Stevenson is going to have 3 total touchdowns against the Los Angeles Chargers. Well, I guess we can call it a defense. I guess, 3 touchdowns is 3 touchdowns, so that's what makes it a hot take. But to me, Ramondre Stevenson, I'm a big fan of the player, and he's playing a Chargers team that really, is going to be putting up a lot of points. So the Patriots need to keep up, and I think Ramondre is going to have a really big day. So to me, I think he can have 3 touchdowns, whether if they're through the air, on the ground, or a combination of the two. But who is your player of the week?
So for my potential player of the week, I'm going with Tyreek Hill here. You know, um, it's pretty vanilla and pretty standard, and I try my best to kind of like, kind of go opposite of that, but it's kind of hard sometimes. I mean, Tyreek Hill,
When it's
everything's
obvious, it's obvious.
exactly, and like we've been saying earlier, I mean, this Washington team, they lose their 2-star DNs, they lose 3 straight. It's not a coincidence, and I think this week. Tua's going to be comfortable in the pocket, like I said earlier. Tyreek Hill's going to have every opportunity to dominate. And add that on top of the fact that he's chasing 2,000 yards. He's chasing to break that receiving record. And he's also chasing to win the Offensive Player of the Year. And so for that reason, I can see Tyreek Hill getting like 200 yards this week.
You don't think that Emmanuel Forbes can lock him down?
He is going to get absolutely torched.
Of course, that was just a joke. But then our Super Bowl favorite, we wanted to include this on each and every week, as we've been doing that just verbally and not visually here. But we've been doing it ever since Amir, you came on the pod. And long time ago, you had the Dallas Cowboys. But as of right now, you have the Philadelphia Eagles. And I agree with you, as again, maybe the most complete team in football. And, even though that you have the Niners winning this week, it's just a matter of playoff football. And to me, I think the Eagles, it's just their year. And I just love the mentality around the entire organization, maybe aside from Nick Sirianni, but I just love everyone's mentality. And of course, they have the talent.
Yeah, the Eagles, like I said earlier too, I mean, their biggest weakness so far is starting off slow. And when you compare this Eagles team to Kansas City, offense is lacking this year. They've been struggling, and it's opposite of last year. Last year they still didn't have the receiving talent they wish to had, but their offense still looked better than this year. This year it has been struggling, some weeks, and when you compare Philly to the 49ers, they're the complete opposite. Philly starts off slow. The Niners, if they're down in the second half, it's pretty much impossible for them to come back. They kind of lack that explosiveness to stretch the field out sometimes, and it kind of like score quick, and comeback wins. That's something Shanahan has struggled with these past few years, and so for that point, I'm picking Philly. I feel like it's so much easier to kind of change starting off slow.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't even know if they're playing their best football right now, and they're 10-1. As crazy as that might sound, but that is ultimately going to do it here for today's episode. Again, Amir, thank you for coming out. Episode 118 and 5.2 thousand subscribers in the books, on the road to 6K. So, of course, if you enjoyed, if you're coming from Amir and you've made it to this point, subscribe to the channel. Even share the podcast. As if you've made it to this point, obviously you enjoyed at least a little bit. So, of course, tell a friend to tell a friend. But any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Nope, man. I love being on this pod. You know, um, I'm hopefully going to contribute some more video ideas pretty soon. This channel is growing so quick, man. It's going to be at 10K before we know it.
Oh, I mean, that's the goal before the end of the year. And again, if you guys could help us get there, I mean, that would be amazing. I mean, 10K before the end of the year would be honestly Amazing, right? Next week, though, we do have a couple ideas, and we'll talk about it maybe off the show, but maybe top 10 duos. Maybe we'll dive into something like that next week. But, every single week it gets a little bland, going through each and every matchup, especially later in the season when a lot of these games are kind of vanilla, cut and dry. So we'll still give you our predictions, but we're going to add something else to the show here, as much as we can. So that is ultimately the goal. But until tomorrow, or I guess until tomorrow night when we drop our fantasy football start sit options for this weekend. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and get out of here.